Thank you so much for joining the Wild and Precious Life series tonight. We are doing what we do every time we gather, giving you very talented poets sharing their work that you're going to enjoy. I'll do my usual plug. I hope that you will purchase a book of someone that is reading tonight. However, if that's not in your budget, don't feel pressured to do so. I just hope that maybe you will remember someone that read tonight, purchased their book, but also remember libraries have budgets. So you can always request a copy of a book that you hear someone read from tonight at your local library to support the authors. I also want to give a plug to my friend Mickey Kennedy. Mickey Kennedy is starting Queer Poem a Day. So yes, poem a day, but queer. So you can go to queerpoems.com and sign up. I would encourage all of you to do that to show support as a queer ally. Again, that is queerpoems.com. So our first reader of the evening is Jami Macarty. And Jami, for your introduction, I'm going to take you back, not actually too far, just to March of 2026. You did an interview with Poet to Poet. And I have to say, everybody tonight, the interviews I was reading, it was really hard to pick just one thing for all of y'all tonight. I really struggled, but I had to do it. So you were asked, what were the thematics of the minuses, which is Jami's first book? And did those carry over into this new work, talking about her book that she's going to read from tonight? How did you discover this particular thematic territory? And I really liked what you said. And this is what Jami said. I want to just say I really love this word territory because our writing is very situated in place. It's place-based, environmentally based, ecologically based, and so territory. In the minuses, there's a poem with the title Territory of Men. So the minuses is very much negotiating, trying to figure out gendered relationships, and in particular, a woman's life and her relationship to the patriarchy, with men in the family, men in the workplace, and men in romantic relationships. The book ends with this female character. There's a sense of self-possession and confidence. She's destroyed. She's alone, but she's walking in the desert. There's some kind of freedom there, both freedom from attachment and a freedom to be in this landscape, this most unwelcoming landscape, in a way, but nonetheless free. The poems in the long now conditions permit are still negotiating the patriarchy. But there's these themes of feminism and ecology coming together more powerfully, the extraction of resources from Earth, the extraction of resources from animals and animal life, and the ways that parallels that treatment, that consciousness or lack thereof, parallels the treatment of women in society. Women are also seen as resources often to be extracted from, so that's how that all comes together. Apologies for whatever's going on with my voice. Thank you so much, Jami, for being here. The screen is yours.
Thanks so much for that warm welcome, Dustin, and for all of your care leading up to this reading. I'm grateful to be included in this wild and precious space with you and Catherine and Lauren. Um, and good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you too. I'm going to be reading from The Minuses. I'm going to read that poem that I was just speaking about in that interview that Dustin read for you. And then I'll focus most of my time on reading from The Long Now Conditions Permit. I want to just offer a bit of orientation. Both of these collections are under the influence of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Minuses official publication date was March 2020. And so the world was shutting down when just at the time I was excited to have citizens of the world open the pages of my first book. And the poems in The Long Now Conditions Permit were written over three 30-day periods between January 2020 and January 2021, and they are under the influence of the COVID-19 pandemic in a different way. And Dustin, in what I was speaking to in that interview, kind of alludes to this. The poems focus on the intimate and systemic injustices that the pandemic brought to the foreground, particularly as it relates to the environment, animal life, and the lives of women. At the center of the poems is the loss of dear female friends, whether due to illness or accident, violence or disagreement. And the poems also address loss within women's lives, such as bodily autonomy and the freedom to walk in public or in the world without having to look over one's shoulder. And so I'll read the poem, The Finder, which is the last poem in the minuses. And that speaks to, it'll fill in some blanks for, or offer you an example of what I was speaking about in my response to that interview. Is the sound okay, everyone? Yay. Okay. Okay, here I go. The Finder. So here we are in the minuses and the Sonoran Desert. The Finder. The weighted boots her feet wear and her willing feet. In this panorama of sharp and conservative plants, she is an internal aspect, a within of the desert, enshrouded in a black dress. Or does she walk through the desert where she is misunderstood and misunderstands? Boot prints through the verbena and verbena growing in her boot prints. Autumn tilts the planet. The length of the day becomes the length of the night. Her hem unravels on a thorn. Evidence of her migration, a black thread. The finder could know her as anyone, anyone. She walks in this place, void of resemblances, beyond understanding, where never is allowed to accumulate. So I'm going to turn to the long now, conditions permit, and sort of stay in the autumn season and move us through the seasons. This book is organized via seasons, sort of both metaphorically and actually. So you'll hear things that occur in seasons, and then also the sort of metaphor of the seasons of a woman's life. Seeker. Horizon's love-sick fool, you pilgrim the earth, chance the ocean, sky's blue hands emphatically open. From hills slant, I roll, breading myself with leaves and grass, my whole body and earth, kiss of dirt, endless blessings, earth transformed, I get up, dust off my phases, sediment disunions, a little prayer from the other side of where I was, which rolled me to where I am. I stand on a rock, and the rock lifts me up. Sun-huddled great heron and I, warm to a stillness, begin a new flirtation with the ordinary world. Is here apparent, or am I futureless already? Across the path that is not mine, my steps crush leaves as demand mows desire at the ankles. From inside red and blushing anthocyanins, red leaves fall. The repartee of two belted kingfishers, two trees apart, duel a duet of strident rat-a-tat-tat prattles. Across the grass that is not mine, across the path that is not mine, across an inlet that is not mine, across an ocean that is not mine. Across the across of my mind, small in the distance, the idea dear leapt, like a doe leaps a fence, leapt a field and grew off in the distance as distance grows. Though small to my eyes, some beastly freedom slipped through forest's ecotone edge, slipped through a deer-shaped door in the undressing trees, and leapt a dimension. Three ladders. A hawk soars over, and I, lost, gawking, hawk follows, forget the mailbox, bank, the avenue's bitumen taste, and climb a sun ladder. Climb a sun ladder to put questions to the red-tailed herald. What is it to have binocular vision with a different earth reeling off each wing? As for your open to no doubts talons, your foot's hook asserted advantage, which rock squirrel, a Houdini? How do you give up your honest body to the rising body of sun-warmed air? I asked, and the change began me in our community of air. Air, sun proportioned in fire and hurry. Air, air, let late sun luster my feathered face. Autumn in the east, the pilot. Not sky, but blue as in bruise. Oak leaves, maple leaves, bird, groundward. Her face, a future plum mulch, eyes swollen shut. The birds forage, the leaves molder, fields brittle, air hoarfrosts. Geese less than south. Bread toasts in the small oven with a family of ducks painted on it. After she asks a question, she sees his hands thrust, throttle her throat. She pitches, drops altitude. His rudder input keeps her flying straight ahead, forward force into the kitchen wall. His dream since a boy to be a pilot. He was, for American. Her daughter makes the correction. She formalizes complaints with the airline, the pilots' union. She causes him to lose the 4 bars on his black epaulets without concern for his future, without regret. Watching fall witch leaf. Oh, enigmatic star, oh, red giant igniting in late phase serrated brightness. Oh, scarlet letters, what more of you are there to say what matters? Each leaf transforms my interior waiting for forgetting to a want of not remembering. The tree adds to the leaf adds to the tree, then lets go is a skillful way of dealing with a multitude of falsehoods and leaving it there. Scattered grassy populace equal to what's been subtracted leaves return ballots cast for Maple's spring result. I equate this leaf's tipping and swinging with dipping into on the mend, or will be, if these gorgeous known foregrounds apply correctly. A part of the sun, these little hometowns of anthocyanins dervish the infinite. Do you agree a northern cardinal could be this one's shadow? Despite the leaf's death, the color lives in red yesterdays, red todays, red tomorrows. Hester Prynne. So Hester Prynne, you all know her, right? The holy, to me anyway, woman protagonist of Nathaniel Hawthorne's 1850s, The Scarlet Letter. Hester Prynne. I let ambiguous shame stitch a letter to my breast. In fact, it was I who stitched it there, a small business embroidery work, and let red thread succor shame's admittance. The townspeople, their scorn and bitterness, a terrestrial form of taunt, their stigma want kept their pleasure like the formal cap confining my hair. But never mind them. This is between me and shame. When that shade-loving slug wants it dimmer, I dim my head and lower the lamp. I make myself available to shame, and shame teases me about my house's floor with dust and potato bugs. Now shame wants some space, so I walk to the shore. My dresses hem lost in a mass of sand, the toilsome sea, my confidant. Though I refuse to give the townspeople the name, I tell you, I could do nothing else but accept the penance and let shame shimmer its A out in the open. Thank you. Thanks so much. So we're going to transition to winter for a very short spell and move to spring as quickly as we can. But perhaps after refusing regret, as the daughter does in Autumn in the East, the pilot, and perhaps while accepting shame, that those become kind of powers in a person's life, in this case, in a woman's life, and create a kind of shimmer, a radiance. So here we go. Harbinger. December 1st's morning fog thins and lifts noontime Anna's hummingbird. Contour, trace, iridescence. Taken as given, lived as given, defending the relevance of radiance. Just going to pause for a sip of water. Goodwill the shadows. I have seen from daylight a comet's perfect falling Y through sky, then 4 rounds buckshot, a familiar field scattered strange. I have been blindly passed silently on shortcuts into evening, left to hold what might be awkward but necessary. Someone missed with my missing body. The way I think of a friendship windmilling disagreement, a slow erasure of being forgiven by a grace my lungs assume on long, dusky, know the reasons, swinging arms walk. Madly, limbs worship uphill what was harsh said to a calm. I shadow who I am to pry up these glory faded voices, hike this attainable hill, body wrapped in feathers, arms sweet sway, pump tears, say, I am as much goddess's light as anyone. Call friend, pretend, call pretend, and from this height, I-10's center lane streams our little scorched lives, love neglected collective ruin of us. Up here, height a river, river enough to wash when word curses endure. The moon a luminous surface to pray to. My understory husks shadows, shows the causes for separation from the world. What if the silence between great horned owls calling to one another is not hesitancy, but a listening pause? Green takes burning, tradition says. Be faithful to the forest. Face dusk. Be faithful to yourself. Darkness can bring forth any star. And then I'm going to close with just a couple of sections from the long concluding poem in The Long Now Conditions Permit. It's called Mind of Spring, and so it bows in the direction of Mr. Wallace Stevens, but also William Carlos Williams and Gertrude Stein, so those great moderns. The poem is very much in love with the Arizona state tree, which is called the Palo Verde tree. It has bright green bark through which it does the majority of its photosynthesis. And in the springtime, April typically in the desert, it has these luminous yellow blossoms. And it's a little windy in the desert in the spring. So they're kind of shaking, the wind's shaking their heads sort of full of golden curls, it seems to me. So here we are, we're back in spring. Palo Verde blossoms dispatched, speed no different than snows, covering, making unknown this ground, yellows, yellows galore. No bees, yellow background, yellow foreground through which my walking occurs. Maybe then might save, if then, after all, the world here, tender world. Spring's hands untying, untying Palo Verde with a single yellow blossom, an entire entirety. Warning trends, no warming trends, sun-filled days, yellow-filled days, golden, golden, green, golden yellows, 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 spring's new arrivals arriving. Palo Verde's yellow blossoms slant to the ground, fast slant, slow, short slant, long, balance finding itself, finding, finding. Thank you so much for your kind attention. It's wonderful to be with you. And
Thank you.
I'll put a link to the Palo Verde tree in the chat so you can see how beautiful it is. Oh, there it is. John Welch is putting it in there for me. Yay. Click on it so you can see how gorgeous it is. Thank you again, everyone, so much. I can't wait to hear you, Catherine and Lauren.
Thank you. Our next reader of the evening is Catherine Esposito Prescott. And I got to know Catherine, a little bit when I lived in South Florida. And before I do your intro, I just have to say, Catherine, you're someone, I don't think of myself as an energy person, except when I really feel it or believe it. And you're someone, when you're in your presence, there's just a lift and the energy in the room. And I appreciate that about you. You're very, very kind and we're always very sweet in your interactions with people. I think maybe a couple times I observed that maybe you didn't deserve kind interactions, but you always were. So for your introduction, I am not taking you back too far. I'm going to take you back to December 2025 when you did an interview with Colorado State University's Center for Literary Publishing. Um, I marked two things and I'm deciding right now. Okay, I have two in front of me. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. Um, the interview the interview, you're talking about some poems you had published in the magazine back in 2024. You're talking about the book that you're going to read from tonight. And the interviewer says, I see references to rishis, reincarnation, and wisdom traditions alongside chemotherapy, experimental medicine, and biology in this series of poems. How do spirituality and science interact in your work, in your mind? What's their relationship? And I really appreciated this this answer. It really hit me. And this is what Catherine had to say. I'm probably the least woo-woo person there is. For me, spirituality and science are both very logical. For me, they work together, not separately. They're fully integrated, and I don't sacrifice one for the other. For me, this thing is true. That thing is true. And maybe this other thing is true. It's more like quantum logic. At least that's what I describe to my students. I'm a student and teacher of yoga philosophy, so that's where the rishis come in. They were the super yogis of ancient times. A lot of their philosophies, darshans, or ways of seeing are very different from how we think in the West. In the yogic tradition, a foundational tenet is that consciousness is primary. Everything begins with consciousness. Consciousness comes into a body and then leaves a body. In the West, it's still very much perceived that consciousness originates in the brain. It's a very different paradigm, but it seems like at least some pockets of the West are now opening up to this other way of thinking. It can be very disorienting, but in my case, it was reorienting. Many of the ancient yogic teachings influenced writers in the West, from the Transcendentalists on. We've inherited a lot of these thoughts and logical systems without fully being aware. You know, Ginsberg says, I always wanted to return to the body where I was born. Well, that's what he was talking about. He was talking about returning to source, returning to that place where we come from. As the yogi said, we're never born, we never die. I think I talk about that in one of my poems, We Change Form. That whole thought is death, a birth, and is birth a death. It's like an open door. It's fascinating, and it also takes the edge off extreme, complex grief. Because if you just have grief to hold on to, it can become an eddy, swirling thing that takes you under. But if you have this other thing, this maybe it can be a portal into something else. That's my hope for these poems. That grief is not just this, and it's not just that. It's both. It's a place where pain and wonder live side by side. Thank you so much for being here tonight. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Dustin. Oh my gosh, I feel like I don't need to say anything now. We just did the whole thing. And by the way, you've always been a peach whenever I've seen you. So I'm really happy I got to know you a bit down in South Florida. And thank you for inviting me to read tonight. Sound is good? Sound is okay? Okay, amazing. Yeah, I'm so honored to be here and in the company of Jamie and Lauren and all y'all. So many of you are poets, so thanks for taking time to be here with us. I know we all have a million and a half things to do. So, Dustin, that was a great setup because that's kind of where we're going to go tonight. We're going to get a little mystical. But I'm going to start with one poem from my first book, Accidental Garden. Um, I don't know if this is like really public knowledge, but well, I write a lot about motherhood, which a lot of you know, but I raised my kids on South Beach, which isn't exactly like one of like the top 10 recommended places to raise your children. But for me, it was idyllic. Their beloved hairdresser was a famous drag queen, and we just had the best time. I don't know how else to say that. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a kind of doorway into that time, and then we'll go on to some of the heavier and lighter stuff. So this is called Sea Turtles. Lifeguards erect flag fences around holes the width and depth of a human head. Holes filled with piles of eggs you'd swear look like buckets of ping pong balls. One night, when the full moon is high, hatchlings will stumble to see if guided by moonlight, not fooled by man-made streetlights or lights from an oceanfront condo. They will survive for another generation, live a slow aging life, not unlike ours. Female sea turtles lay their eggs on the same beach where they were born. Scientists don't know how they find home. Is it the taste and feel of the water, the temperature of the sand, some other feeling as yet undetectable to humans, turtle pulse and hiss? When all grown, I don't know if my children will remember the beach where they were born, if they will hurry to escape it for greener grasses, or if they'll paddle back, or if it will even be here, where their lives began, in a sunlit space, tempered by palm trees and aquamarine, where sand marked their first steps, and the ocean's howls met their first screams. One day, which may have been many, they ran towards the sea with their half-dollar size fists raised and plastic shovels pitched like tritons to announce their voyage off to its depths, as if in an act of reverse evolution, from toes to webbed feet, from lungs to gills, or as if headlong into an unseeable future, or as if into the adventure of a lifetime, or into the adventure of the moment, into the forever long now, their eyes fixed on the past they've carved through water, through land, the ones that call from the soul's wild knowing. So that's kind of what every day was like, every day for, a decade, however those decades go by. Um, and so I read these books together too because I found out Accidental Garden had won a prize, and that's like the best news that a poet can receive. Well, one of them, right? You're just like, oh my gosh, really? No, it happened? What? And so it was like the best professional news. And then 2 weeks later, we received news that our middle son had an inoperable brain tumor, which would take his life. And the two are not exactly, they don't balance accounts, but that's kind of what happened. So these poems were all written in a very kind of close time span, and some overlap a little bit. And I think one contextualizes the other. So I'm going to switch now to Super Bloom. And this book was begun about 6 months before my middle son's diagnosis, and it was finished about 6 months after. So I want you to get to know Austin a little bit tonight. I think you would like that. He was a middle child and very, very active, a very active human. And then his senior year of high school, he was diagnosed with this awful brain tumor. Um, so this is a poem I wrote for him, and it's called Spirit Animal, but not in the very reverent traditional sense of a spirit animal. It's more in that teenage way that kids ask each other, what's your spirit animal? Like, what's your favorite color? When you're a teenager, you're just kind of like filling out forms and trying to get to understand your identity, right? Through all these means. So this was in the context of what animal do you identify with? And I have to say he was probably more of a monkey, maybe a little bit of a muskrat, and then it changed. Um, this was previously published with the title Sloth. The sloth was never your spirit animal until it was, once vibrant, once running to scale Lake Mountain trails, once streaking down the soccer field, once never home. Your future called by you in cap and gown. The pomp never suited you, but that path also. The tumor erupted, enveloping healthy brain cells. My love, the future, yours, surrendered itself. So the sloth, he sleeps. He breathes, and by breathing knows he's living. So the dynamic exchange of oxygen and carbon danced in you, animated your listless life, but only for 1 year. Then the branch broke. Then we lumbered. Then we lived upside down. So Austin was sick for about a year. Kids with a kind of brain cancer he had, um, they're lucky if they get it an extra, 11, 12 months post-diagnosis. So now we're going to travel a little bit from South Beach and Miami to Arizona, to the Grand Canyon. In the spring of 21, we insisted on taking the kids to the Grand Canyon, and I don't regret it at all, but it was a weird COVID-y time because you had to wear masks at the Grand Canyon, and it was like doing on and off, and no one knew what they were doing. And the kids later told me they were terrified, but I'm so glad that we went and never regret travel. And I have this one picture of Austin standing on the rim of the canyon taking a picture of it. And that's where, and this is a bit of a long one. I don't normally write long poems, but I don't know, I just felt like I needed to read this today. Oh, and what else you need to know is at the end, I get a little mystical. When Austin was passing and probably beforehand, I had a few very mystical experiences, and one of them comes in at the end here. Field of vision. The kids stand on the canyon's lip. 3 living statues, 2 with earbuds, 1 too young to drown out her parents' voices. The one I want to bring into focus, however, is the boy who would feel tremors of headaches the following spring. In this photo, he wears a bemused smile before turning to face the expanse, the wideness, the stratifications of minerals and rocks and time, millennia carved, fossils etched into what we believe to be solid matter, stoic, barely yielding to change. But now we know better, don't we? How organisms work in concert, how every living thing needs a host, and how cells choose to work for the invaders rather than the native body, and how one wrong move can cause the body's programming to go so tragically wrong. In the next photo, this parent distanced teen, the one we are laser focused on, holds up his iPhone to the canyon as if toasting it, impressed by its long emptiness, its difficult distances through which his voice could not travel. I understand. It was all his eye could hold. When I looked into the chasm, my visual field became towers and spires named for Hindu deities and indigenous deities, more myth than fact, the origins complex and unknown, farther, sinuous stone shaped by water unremembered. Each layer an historical record of a sea and a tide that once moved through this space, an art piece, collage of rust, gold, rose, and lavender with tufts of emerald. 18 months later, his expiration date was given, 18 years, during which time sped and dragged and elapsed, then collapsed. And yet today, when I open my Photos app, here he is standing on the rim of the canyon, taking a photo of the last world wonder he would visit. But we didn't know it then. All we knew was that his teenage brain stopped to take it all in, and he marveled in his way as he snapped his friends. Weeks after he left the body, I laid on a healer's table and drifted to an alpine wilderness with technicolor grass, fluorescent flowers, a sky too blue for this world. The boy who once stood on the edge of the canyon sat on a mountaintop in meditative silence. I didn't know what to make of this journey, dear readers, but I saw myself, a blue light, crawl back into my body, and as I woke, I understood the way the rocks feel all beings who have passed through their layers, that even though the boy was all my eyes could hold, the joy and the wonder in my frame, it was his time, not mine. You were very good. That was very long. See. And now I'm going to read, I think just, well, do I want to read one more? Okay, we'll do two more. We'll do two more. Um, because of Jami inspired me because of her yellow poem, her poem with lots of yellow. This book is kind of broken into primary colors. For me, that love between a mom and her kid, it's primary for me in my life. So this book has many meditations and meditations on these colors. So let's go with meditation on yellow. It's an attempt at a kitchen sink poem. Let's see. The golden hour, the third in the spectrum, and sunflowers and bananas and the sun, the afterglow of its set and its rise, and citrus and clean and bright, gleaming starshine between green and orange, daffodils, aspens in late autumn, leaves in decay dying. Also eternal, also indestructible, the skin and the bones of some gods, certain stinging bees. It commingles and communes well with purple. Royal robes complement gold, foolish or bright. Shimmering disco ball, the city of jewels, the ego center, power and winning. Every one an illusion, every trophy, every minute and monument, every brocade, every chain, the photos, the poses, all you possess titles too. But the light of you, still here, although earth reclaimed your body, although carbon reunited with carbon, although your carbon feeds a tree, more limbs than a human body could hold, and more carbon. We write gold and it autocorrects to God. We forget the luster, the wonder beyond our senses, beyond these words, even though they were brought to us in one legend by the divine herself. What is my job here as a mother missing her son? There are no words for a mother without her son. Not widowed or widower, not unmothered, beyond bereft, without lacking minus, beyond bereaved, deprived of, dispossessed, which implies layered suffering, lamentation, and left. We know very well what are missing. We have no language for who I am or for what I may become. Thank you so much. I hope you survive. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that reading, Catherine. So, our final reader of the evening is Lauren Camp. And I actually got to meet Lauren. I was about to say this year, but it was last year, at Lit Youngtown. Happened to walk into lunch at the same time. So we broke bread together and had some great conversation and laughs and talk of poetry. And I think you were helping me with the great book debacle. My water bottle came open. It ruined half my books, and I think Lauren was helping me pat them down. Lauren, I'm not, I think actually, yeah, yours is the furthest back. I'm taking you back to 2023. for your intro, and it's when you did your interview with poets.org for your Poet Laureate Fellow interview, their series. Um, and I think you'll understand why I'm reading this excerpt. They asked, how can a poet or poetry bring community together? And I liked what you had to say, and this is what Lauren had to say. Perhaps the answer to this is in the building of safe spaces. Often on my poet laureate trips, the audience has been composed of people who don't know that a poem can speak to them or for them, though they've perhaps held one or two close to help steady themselves in emotionally charged situations. When I meet with them, I ask them to bring their secret interests to the surface. And each time I watch their hesitation. One thing that works very well for me in these gatherings is to relax with the audience rather than approaching them with a fixed and formal program, which can create distance between the speaker and audience. I show them a poet who is a normal human. I tell them why I write, when I don't, where I fumble in a poem, and how I try to address that. I disclose that it's okay if they can't connect with every poem they read. It's easy to share with them my endless enthusiasm for discipline, and I see how that sparks their interest. They become more open to the intimacy of what we're doing together, using poetry to understand ourselves and each other, to enlarge our empathy and clarify the world around us. But it's equally important to acknowledge what the assembled group can do for each other. I've taught community workshops for 15 years and have long been awed by how a collective built on openness and safety will offer attention, kindness, and support. Each week, I see people look out for each other, allowing differences of opinions or holding each other in moments of vulnerability. I see them welcome each other in the poem. It is poetry that has built such a community. People pull together to consider and untangle words on a page, to offer their complicated relationships to those words, and to stand aside and hear others' viewpoints. Thank you so much for being here tonight. The screen is yours.
Wow, thank you for that. It's so curious hearing my own words back to me, but I still believe them. And I was thinking as I was listening to Jamie and Catherine about how much humanness there has been so far in this evening's reading and humanity. And it's really an honor to follow both of you in your poems. And Dustin, to be back here at your incredible reading series. Now for episode or whatever you call it, 130. Amazing. Well, I feel very lucky to be here for a lot of reasons, but also because I have some of my family in the room, and that feels it feels meaningful. It feels I don't know exactly, but I'm reading poems about my father. And I'm going to read from two books. I'll try to hold them both up. There they are. You can kind of see them, right? I'm going to start with my newest book, Is Enough, which tracks my father's plummeting into dementia. I mostly think these poems aren't horribly sad. They're mostly in the present moment. Although, it's a tragic disease, so some of them also are sad. This first poem that I'm going to read has a title that bridges directly into the poem. It's called "It Is Not Easy to Live in Many." It is not easy to live in many universes. This morning, I wanted to see my father on my sister's phone screen, wanted to show him the street of my smile, but his mind was full of its almonds. The day concentrated its heat, a merciless rectangular room. When I was a girl, my father could wreck an intention, his anger a gash, and now defenseless, clear days when we are beautiful faces, what he supposes we are. Scientists use mouse models to understand this disorder. I am the wise one, the fearful one. I read more about mice. Sometimes I tell my father we're rich on bread and orchids. I tell him what is a garden, a harbor. Rather than grief, a question starts at the end. I maze through the latest statistics and spend further hours with a broom and a teapot. General disintegration. Yesterday, in a doctor's office, I saw a photo in National Geographic of rhinos. Through long windows, the ecstatic sunshine came into view. I sat in this tired body, looked at the rhinos. Men had cut off the horns. I will care about everything. Those mysterious mammals, those mammoth gaps in their heads. My father is losing his mind, and all the things I know right now are what a hole can do, how that hole keeps being empty. You know, I live most of my time, my days in a very um, satisfying or unsatisfying present. Like I'm not looking ahead, I'm not looking behind too much. And that is kind of what dementia is. So I found it very appealing and interesting to witness, to be not just daughter, which I was being certainly, and also one of the caretakers or kind of attendants in some way to my father's health, finances, all of it, but also being a writer and stepping to the side of all that and just watching, just gathering bits. This poem is called Prognosis. My father is all at once. It is noon and widens further into another landscape of feet. The words he uses are a measure of the half point to silence. We listen to the mirror on the wall, and my father is bent down with grizzle and returning spaces. My father reminds me of my father. Father as conveyance, as legal document, as night flight, lost pitch. Next question. For something to do, we name the body by streaming daylight. Knee, nerve, stomach. Reason, the tender sound of sun. Name hope as a pleasantry. We are spending our time folded into it, finding ourselves. We are not doing nothing. We are planning the task of letting go of all thought, and my father is root and tree. I put my hand on his hand and build a small mountain. I haven't described his voice. An hour passes again, a sound not said, a negative ghost. A rain unbuckles the leaves. Perhaps we'll look in the mirror and see what just happened. What I mean is the future. It took me just about forever to put this book together. I put together one version of it, I guess maybe a year or two after my dad died. And when I came back and looked at it, I didn't like it. It felt tragic. It felt pitiful, really, to be really honest. And I came back, I rearranged a lot of it. I took out a bunch of the poems. I mean, I had written 3 times as many poems as are in the book, so that wasn't hard to do, to find others. But I also put in poems that were mainly either about something else that was in some way connected or about an earlier time. This is, I guess, the former. If I tell you how, do you understand why? Someone left a child's red boot in the path. Done with motion and arrivals, it makes me want to make a list of trusts. When I lived in Boston, I dated a bus driver. We went to a club where I handed over a fake ID, and the bouncer saw me, young and soft, a plucked berry. He let me in, knowing that night I might cloudburst or underworld. The city was bearable with dirty habits of snowbanks, tired streets, people at each corner doubled beside beaches, holding up signs lettered hope. I give my coats to such suffering. Bus driver bought me a drink orange with ice. He whispered. I didn't know what to do with a man with a mustache. It's ridiculous, the construction of a memory. The club was dark and smoky and full of decisions. I can't say I felt lucky. We left to walk that old, crisp night. Boston was ruined with slippery weather. He was gentle, didn't touch me. Dwindling flakes latched to the ground, and I never saw him again. 1 hour bent to another. I had no armor. I didn't need a map to know where we were going. And then days went on, and here I am, with the boot, with the desert, the sun, me beside me in the perfect center of reason, which looks maybe like nothing, but I call it trust. Fortune. I keep lists of plants and lists of the best of everything else. Lipsticks and Latvian streets and thrift stores at every distance. I continue to think it would be good to do some reliable fleeing. I get ahead of myself, seeking goodness at each next corner. In September, I saw some of the space on the surface of a desert, a doll's house of sedums, an abacus of seedlings. I smelled the familiar artemisia, the vertigo of the bleeding heart. We've lived in the same house for a score, but took out peas and foxgloves, put in small greening truth particulate amidst rust. We've built many gardens, and yesterday crouched down to see what the plants have done since the last time we crouched or dropped water on them. And then we went to Tim's, and he made curry, and we hovered over old memories, sucking the nectar out of them, trying to remember if they were true or right. Full, we sat on the couch that came with his tiny place, and Tim showed us a ballet he had cued on his screen. 40 dancers skinned to transparencies, bellying from hushed sounds to bending. Tim had been away 14 years, lived in Milwaukee near his mother. He still has a globe of white hair. Moment passes moment to make a lifetime. I can no longer list the many people I've been, all the proportion and practice, breath and riddle worn soft. It's a new day. We might get rain. I dress in a shirt the color of sky and other pale traces. I'll go outside. The earth is full of surprises. Dad once planted marigolds. I'm going to read one more poem from this book. It's very short. It's called Given. Endlessly governed by the endless, tangled lines, private pause, invaluable hours. This is all worth repeating. The rise and collapse. It is still enough for today, and what will come next will come next. the same threshing. So in August 2022, I spent a month at Grand Canyon, and I lost track, Catherine, of when you were there. I think it was a little before that. Yeah. I was there with this illustrious title of astronomer in residence, and I'm not an astronomer, but I am a poet who can acknowledge and consider the dark with all of my senses and attempt to put some kind of language to it. So I did that for a month. It was extraordinary to be in one of the most amazing wonders of the world, to really be in it, sometimes along the rim, but sometimes deep inside it, walking down into history and also having the greater universe history sort of circling around overhead and over this huge hole. So I thought I'd end by reading you two poems from the book that Grand Canyon National Park made of what I did that month. The book is called In Old Sky, and I'll show it to you again because Dustin told me I'm supposed to hold up the book cover, the book, so you can see it. This is called Time and Time to Configure. A little flicker of glitz, the red-clocked juniper, an imaginable defiant danger, an unfinished ice age to summit, a bend in tense geology. I can hear all the future that's left. The sky roves a transparent map and cools in separations, days leftover gauges. I patch up with small mosses, stay in the same clothes of truth I wear endlessly. The buckle of hawk nerve in the air and the unaimed supply of view. Slouchy perfection. I love to track the barren, waiting each night to hear fluid air, then sleep on my side, the blanket a wing. Not alone, and with me an entire self. I asked strangers the difference between night and darkness. They wrote with small pencils of when they chased God in hayfields and what kind of toil seduced that impermanence. This is a quick life story. I swayed in the suburb of my family, surrounded by pavement and our rejoined calamities, but see now the way we all parted. My brother tells it best, how I waited, holding my beak where it belonged, then took what I needed and fluttered away. Didn't we each have our nests and our eases? We never considered how the moon cradled its belly every night, even if we didn't look. And I'm going to read one last poem. Thank you all for spending a little time with us. What a treat to be here with you. This poem is called The Believer. There is a time of night, soft enough to call joy, comet cluster, the wind, a wishbone, no one else. I wake to see the sky adore its shifting. My journey could be explained as kissing the rocks, setting a table for silence, symmetrical mules. I am a whole room of creaking and flooding. Not every star shines in front of me. Time grows from stout edge into a sequence of coppers, enlightened by a slight circle of birds. For hours, elk haunches eased in shrubbery. At the start, it terrified me to be so open to a black hole. But now I know what is necessary, the far end of lavish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. If you'll just stay for a couple minutes, couple things to say. Remember, I put the links in the chat so you can find everyone here that read tonight has a website. Check out their websites. There may be services, workshops, all those good things that you can find through those websites. The best way to support writers is to buy their products and do workshops with them and all the things. But again, if that's not in your budget, no one should ever feel pressured to do so. Take advantage of those libraries and request a copy at your local library so that those funds are used. Additionally, say we will not be back next month. I am taking June off. I hate to take off during Pride Month because I'm a pretty proud queer here. But just so many things are going on in June that I can't do a good job with the series. But we will be back in July. So please, please, please put July 8th on your calendar. We will have Daniel Lassell, Lynn Lawson, and my good Judy Diamond Ford will be reading on July 8th. So I hope that you will come back and see us then. And just remember, I don't want your money, but I do want you to do something. If you enjoyed this series, I want you to talk about it online. Nothing helps more than word of mouth promotion, whether that's on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky. Still waiting for somebody to do a TikTok video. I'm too old for TikTok. I can't do it. But if anybody wants to get real jazzy, I would love a Wild and Precious Life TikTok video. Make us go viral. If you would do that, it would mean so much. And just remember, the world is a fucking dumpster fire right now. So be kind to others, but also be kind to yourself because it's really rough right now. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you on July 8th. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine and Lauren.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dustin.
Have a
Night.
wonderful night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.